Tonight, we are so happy to see you and hear this brand new play, Aurora. Tonight's presentation is a free public reading, and it's free because it's been funded by the San Antonio Department of Arts and Culture Individual Artist Grant that was awarded to our Playwright and friend community. It is free of charge, but there are other ways to follow Amy's work and support her work inside the program. Tonight, we want to also welcome our community resources. The Meals on Wheels folks are here in front, our Alzheimer's Association friends. And you'll see that tonight's performance is also interpreted in ASL through Stagehands, a wonderful company here, and their interns are here as well. Welcome. We'll have a short 10-minute intermission to enjoy some birthday cake and celebrate Aurora's birthday tonight. And without further ado, please sit back and enjoy Aurora.
Act 1. There is something about looking at the stars that is so beautifully isolating and connecting at the same time. Something that reminds us of how small we are and how big the universe is. And we stare up and dream of becoming those stars. To shine, to be bigger than ourselves, to cover the world in our light. And together, we make up constellations and silly shapes with which we use to identify ourselves. When I was born, the sun was in the sign of Leo, the lion, a fire sign, which means when I'm at my best, I shine like the sun, warm but capable of burning, with a heart, smile, and sometimes the temperament of a small child running and laughing through a field of sunflowers. The moon was in Pisces, a water sign, which means I could spend my whole life daydreaming a new world, and my courageous lion heart is filled, like my eyes, with so many feelings. My tears flow like a public water fountain someone forgot to repair, and Sagittarius rising means I'm restless, with the desire to do and be everything for everyone, never really feeling like I'm enough. My grandmother is a Capricorn. Capricorns are known for being hardworking, ambitious, responsible, practical, disciplined, loyal, focused on their goals, mostly work. My grandmother was very hardworking. She was always eager to serve others through her work. I think she used to work for the post office at one point, and then the courthouse. She was an accountant and a secretary. But most of her life, she ran a grocery store called Aurora's Fruits and Vegetables in a tiny town in West Texas called Sanderson. If you were driving through and you yawned, you'd miss it. The town spanned about a half mile, and you'd never really think people lived there. At her store, she served travelers in need of a break from the long Texas highway, oil riggers in the area, and most importantly, the citizens of Sanderson. Her grocery store changed over time. In her younger days, it included a bar, and as she grew older, she added a flower shop so the people of Sanderson could have fresh flowers to celebrate life at both birthdays and funerals alike. The flower shop, more of a closet in reality, is where she taught me how to make a bow out of wired ribbon. Bows didn't just appear in plastic bags at Target. You could make one. Who knew? Her store had coolers, freezers, and even the Schwan man who would dress in all yellow, and he'd come by like an old style milkman and refill the ice cream cooler. She sold everything from eggs, milk, and bread to clay pots, chimeneas, and sculptures of saints and jewelry from Mexico. When I was a little girl, we'd go with her to Mexico or to Laredo, Texas, to shop for special items. There was this incredible shop owned by these two beautiful women that was filled top to bottom with items imported from China. It was a warehouse. And every time we went, my grandmother would stop and catch up with the ladies, and they would show her things I had never seen before. Beautiful dolls, pictures that lit up and had waterfalls that seemed to move in these decadent golden frames. My favorite were these hair clips shaped like butterflies. Each butterfly's wings shimmered with color and glitter, and as you wore them in your hair, they seemed to move. You see, there was this tiny little spring attached to the little wings, which allowed the butterflies to flap their wings in the wind as you walked. Sometimes we'd go sell things at markets and festivals, and my grandmother would always let me sell the butterfly hair clips. I'd lay them out carefully on a piece of red velvet right next to the angel magnets. Back at the warehouse, she would decide what special items would go into the truck. For as long as I can remember, she drove a big blue Chevy truck, much bigger than you would ever expect a woman of her size to drive. She was probably 5 feet tall, maybe 5'5" if you count her bouffant hair. She had it set weekly by the local hairdresser. My mother was always responsible for backing up the truck at festivals. I need you to remember this is a time before backup cameras. Yeah, I'd peek through the tiny window at the back of the truck and pray we'd get it the second, third, sixth, 12th time, as my mother politely told me to sit down. Every male attending the festival seemed to notice and would ask, "You sure you don't need some help?" But my mom wasn't only backing up a truck. Attached to the truck was the largest trailer bed in existence, that I thought. We would fill it to the brim every time we take it to the H-E-B in Del Rio to restock her store. At the time, my grandmother's grocery store was the closest store within 100 miles of Sanderson. So we would drive 3 hours to Del Rio and load as much as we could into banana boxes. The workers at the local H-E-B knew my grandmother and would save banana boxes for her to load her groceries in. It was a whole process. At the store, we'd take 2 grocery carts each, me, my mom, my grandmother, and load them carefully, strategically, with the items in need of restocking and any special requests her customers had. I'd watch as she would cross off the requested items in her notebook with her beautiful cursive handwriting. My heart still swells up when we occasionally find an old price tag with her handwriting on it. She must have done that drive to Del Rio once a month, maybe once a week. We lived in San Antonio, about 5 hours a week away from Sanderson, but we'd drive up and spend time with her when we could to help her out. One time we decided to make a bunch of baked goods for her to sell at the store, but I read the directions wrong, and I added 2 cups and a third cup of oil to the cake batter instead of 2/3 cup. It was a sad day for the cake, but my mom made up for it. She helped me make my first upside down pineapple cake. I watched her carefully place the perfectly sliced pineapple circles on top and little maraschino cherries. My parents have worked in the restaurant business my entire life, so when we visited my grandma and served food to customers at her store, it felt like home. My mom would make as many breakfast tacos as possible, and we'd sell them to the workers who would stop by on Sunday mornings before their shifts. My grandmother would make me chorizo and egg, my favorite. You know the kind. The ones with the concerningly bright orange colored grease that would soak right through the paper towel. Yeah, those. Those are the best. But I think my favorite thing while staying with my grandmother was the fact that I could walk directly from her house to her grocery store and grab whatever I wanted to eat, like cinnamon toast crunch cereal. Sometimes I'd feel a tinge of guilt for taking the last box in the store away from the children of Sanderson when I knew I had access to as many boxes as possible when I got home. That one summer, my mom decided to let me stay with my grandmother, who thought it was a reasonable idea to leave me in charge of the store. I think I was 10, maybe. Uh, Now, in 1946, when my grandmother was 10 years old, this was probably a rational thought. I'm sure she could handle it. But me? Well, I treated the cash register like a toy, and I rang up every item in the store that I wanted, including a giant dream catcher with real furs and a picture of a Native American woman in the center. And after I completed my fake shopping spree, I cleared the register, which apparently did a number on her accounting books. And when I made friends with a little girl who was the daughter of the pastor at the church across the street, I went ahead and took $20 out of the register to buy the cookbook she was selling. My grandmother later explained to me that a cash register is not a wallet, and for some reason, she didn't leave me in charge of the store anymore. I don't really know where my grandmother was born. According to an obituary, her brother, my great uncle Oscar, was born in Durango, Mexico. Was she? What did little girls do in Mexico in the late 1930s? Certainly not what I did in the late 1990s, which was mostly teach my stuffed animals what I learned at school that day, color and sing songs dramatically in my closet that I made up in my mind while wearing one of my mother's long skirts as a dress. Clearly, nothing has changed. When did they move to Texas? Were they at risk of being deported? She told me once that they came here when they were little, but how young? And what pushed them to leave their home? What sacrifices did she make? My mom told me once that we had a great uncle who was elected president of Mexico and then shot. Maybe that triggered the move. My grandmother rarely talked about her past. Not that I think she was ashamed of it. I just think maybe she wasn't allowed or didn't feel safe or didn't feel it was appropriate to tell a child. But for some reason, as I was driving her to Kingsville, 3 hours away, to visit her sons, my uncles Jimmy and Joey, she started to talk about it. All I remember was driving in the pitch black, barely able to see the white stripes in front of me, trying to stay awake. State patrol cars were patiently waiting for someone to make a mistake, and giant 18-wheeler trucks revved past me, pushing 80 miles per hour, while my grandmother slept. On the drive there, she told me that her uncle, my tío Jose, used to sell chicle in the streets of Mexico. Chicle are these tiny little packs of gum. I imagined someone running up to him to tell him what happened, that his brother had been shot. They had to run, and so they did. I loved my tío Jose. He must have lived until he was about 150. He was my Albus Dumbledore. He felt immortal and like he had already lived forever. He wasn't a US citizen, so he wasn't permitted basic human rights in this country. He lived with a family in a room hidden in a back. A family who knew he could be deported any day, so they held that over his head, and he lived there in exchange for hard labor. He built houses, dug through the hard limestone desert grounds of Texas, put up fences. I can only imagine the things this man went through, his fears, his experiences. He didn't speak English. I didn't speak Spanish. I grew up in a Spanish-speaking household, but when I asked to learn the language, they said no because they didn't want us to know their secrets. They could chisme all they wanted right in front of us, but we wouldn't know derecha from izquierda. But I think it was also probably because they were punished in school for speaking Spanish as kids, and They didn't want the same thing to happen to us. My godmother told me once that she was speaking to one customer in Spanish at work, and another customer overheard and proceeded to give her a lecture about how she should speak English and how this was America. To which she replied with perfect clarity and articulation, "How can I help you?" But I wanted to talk to my tío Jose. So I took 8 years of Spanish from middle school all the way to college, just so I could talk to him. "Hola, tío," I'd say. "Hola, mija," he'd say. "¿Cómo estás?" I'd say. "Bien," he'd respond. "¿Y tú?" He'd humor me. "Así, así," I'd say, proudly flaunting my intermediate vocabulary. "Bien, bien," he'd say, smiling. He was one of the kindest and most gentle people I knew. He always wore the same thing, like a cartoon character. He looked like a Wranglers commercial, though I'm sure they weren't Wranglers. He wore boots to protect his ankles from snakes, jeans to protect his legs from chiggers, long sleeve button-down shirts to protect his skin from the sun, a cowboy hat to cover his gray hair, a white undershirt because no man in my family ever believed in being shirtless. After all, it was a dangerous thing working under the Texas sun. And he topped all of that off with a plaid flannel jacket in Texas. He didn't have AC in his house, so I'm sure most places felt cold to him. We'd visit him every now and then with my grandmother, and I saw that his room was half a bed shoved behind a curtain made of blankets. As my grandmother shook his hand goodbye, she would sneak him a $20 bill, hoping the people he lived with wouldn't see it and take it from him. "Hi, Uncle," I'd say. "Hi, little one," he'd say. "How are you?" "Good. And you?" "So-so," I'd say. And he'd smile, that warm smile. But where was his family? His wife, his kids, his tío Jose? I searched for his names in the obituaries, but I couldn't find it. I don't even know what his last name was. There were many people, many important men in my grandmother's life, one being my grandfather, Julio Abrigo. I never knew my grandfather personally. He died before I had the chance to meet him. But I wondered how young my grandmother was when she met him. When did they get married? Did she really love him? Or did she need a way to become an American citizen? Was he funny? Was he a good person once? For as long as I can remember, I've known that my grandfather was abusive. It always seemed normal to me because of how frequently my mother would talk about it, almost half threatening me and half telling me how grateful I should be that she didn't string me up by my ankles in the closet. Though she used to joke this is how I got so tall. I used to think the stories she told me were just stories, like that of Miss Trunchbull throwing kids into the chokey in the book Matilda. But as I got older, I came to understand why my mother was forced to run away from home at 13. She started working at Dairy Queen at 16 and was forced to grow up too soon. When she told her mother what he did to her, she called her a liar and stayed married to my grandfather until the day that he died. My grandfather caught one of my uncles smoking a cigarette once. "Oh, do you want to smoke?" My uncle considered whether or not he should say yes. It was one of those moments frozen in time where you don't know what to say and you know you're in trouble no matter what you say, where you feel like you deserve what's about to happen, even if you don't, even if no one does. And then my grandfather forced him to smoke an entire pack of cigarettes in one go, one after the other. He'd finish one, then light another, and make him keep smoking until he was sick. But it taught him a lesson, my mother said. He never smoked a cigarette again. What a way to learn a lesson. I think the real lesson here was I need to get out of this house as soon as possible. And then one of my uncles got into trouble at school. My grandfather was called and had to go to the school in person. There wasn't a Zoom option back then. He didn't like that very much. He was a busy man, didn't like his time being wasted. So he told his son that if he ever messed up again, he'd kill him. And to help him remember, as they walked home, my grandfather kicked my uncle all the way there, like some sort of human football. I don't think he forgot. When he was older, my uncle tried to join the force as a police officer. When they did his physical, his backbone was so messed up from what my grandfather did to him that he wasn't allowed to join. Imagine surviving child abuse, feeling inspired to become a police officer so you can stop other children from experiencing what you did and being told no. In high school, my mother was a varsity cheerleader. She never told me this. I found out through pictures someone shared on Facebook a few years back. Apparently, it costs money to be in cheer, but my mother earned the funds by sewing everyone else's cheer uniforms, working hard to do what she loved from the beginning. When I found out, I asked her about it. Mom, you were a varsity cheerleader? To which she said, oh, I wasn't really a cheerleader. I was on the bottom of the pyramid. I just held everybody up. What a perfect metaphor for how my mother lives, holding everyone up, no matter what pain and sorrow she has. My mother sought her own justice from my grandfather through law school. She wanted to become a lawyer so she could put her father away for good. She worked during the day at Jack in the Box and then went to law school at night. She would have finished school too, but my grandfather had a heart attack and died at the doctor's office. It was strange. He was walking out of the office, dropped on one knee, and just died. His watch stopped ticking when his heart did, and so did my mom's motivation. She quit law school and went into the restaurant business full time, finding a new way to serve others. My Uncle Joey went into the oil business and used his wealth to foster, adopt, and raise hundreds of children. My Uncle Jimmy raised one of the largest and most beautiful families I've ever seen. He provided them with a home, agriculture, and a 4-H club. They were in pageants and rodeos, and he taught them to not take life too seriously. This man works in construction, has survived multiple heart attacks, but still thought it would be hilarious to pretend when he was changing our light bulb in our living room that he was being electrocuted. I guess they all found their own justice. I'm not sure when my mom told me all of this. Maybe it was when they taught us about child protective services at school. I used to tell my mom I was going to call CPS on her. I also used to call anyone who drank one glass an alcoholic. And when my mother tried to give me baby aspirin for a headache I had, I told her Nancy Reagan told me to say no to drugs. She tells the story a lot and buttons it with, oh, but when she had her first period, she was begging me for Midol. Yes, I was. She would later tell me she would call senior abuse on me. We never called. My mom only spanked me once, and I know she hated herself for it. When it happened, I was silent, my face blazing with rage. She cried herself to sleep that night, wailing to her partner about how horrible she felt about laying a hand on me, terrified of turning into her father. Apparently, spanking me didn't work. It didn't seem to bother me, it just made things worse. So they tried something else. Something taken from my Aunt Norma's arsenal of Scorpio superpower manipulation tactics. Putting me in the corner. Now, anyone who grew up in my Aunt Norma's family knows you did not mess with my Aunt Norma. When you were in her car, you were silent. You were not allowed to eat in her car, nor would you ever ask to do so. The car was to be kept pristine, as well as the house, your plate, and any surface you interacted with. If you're playing your cards right, it should look and sound like you never existed. If the radio was playing in the car, you could sing along, but if someone received a phone call, you were to be so silent that God forgot about you. To this day, if she told me to blow my nose, sit up straight, or suck it in, I'd probably do it. And I respect her for that. And for all that she's done in her life, the things I can only imagine she's clawed through as a woman in advertising and print business, and how she's raised her kid and multiple grandkids, mostly as a single mother and grandmother. But the thing my Aunt Norma will always be known for is her pantry. Her pantry is what I used to imagine heaven being like. A perfectly organized multiple shelf storage of endless goodies, cereal with marshmallows and cinnamon sugar, and oh, don't get me started on her house, a treasure trove of child's gold. She had a pool table that commanded reverence and a mini basketball hoop that we'd shoot koozies through, and if you need something, Norma probably has it. Coloring supplies, Barbies, bath toys, Honey Nut Cheerios, a full catering setup, confetti cake for your birthday, a porch swing, a hot tub, and a DJ on her back porch blasting, "My anaconda don't want none unless you got buns, hon." She truly has anything and everything your heart could desire. We used to run races together, 5Ks. I miss it. She smiles at me now with a genuine kindness, warmth, patience, and understanding. She knows the world. She built her own castle and filled it with everything we needed. Who did the family seek for her wisdom in trail mix making? Who still has the baby spoon of her over 30-year-old daughter? Who has the most spotless vehicle in all of Texas? Norma. The women in my family are powerhouses of a different realm. This is their world, and we are mere mortals living in it, powerhouses of our own. So back to my mom, trying not to become my grandfather, scared to ask my grandmother, seeking to discipline what I can only imagine was a very overly enthusiastic, energetic, chaotic explosion of a child with hair racing down past her bum, probably well in need of a comb and some L'Oreal Kids detangler spray. So she followed my Aunt Norma's advice, and she put me in time out. I wailed endlessly, scream crying, not in a rage, but in a pain that seemed to fill rivers past the levels of any ocean, a monsoon that swelled within me and resulted in a tsunami that converted our house into the Titanic and turned my mother into a very confused captain with the wheel of the ship broken off in her hands. "What's wrong with you? You sound like someone's murdering you." "You hurt my feelings." Oh, Lord. This wasn't the first time in my life that one of my parents would refer to me as a drama queen. And yet they claimed to have no idea I would have any interest in theater. That was the last time they put me in timeout. I don't really know how they got me to behave, or maybe they never did. Honestly, I was pretty spoiled, but I never did anything terrible to the house. Did I try to cut my own hair and fail astronomically? Of course. But who gave the 4-year-old scissors? Did I try and use those dumb scissors that can't cut through paper to cut off the ear of a girl who pissed me off in kindergarten? Yes, I did. But was I successful? Not that time. But my parents did their best with me, with each other, with themselves, and so did my grandmother. She always told me how smart I was and how I would always get all A's. So when I got my first C in college because my perfectionism prevented me from turning something in on time, I was a bit of a mess. I never really knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. But when I was little, my grandmother used to tell me, "Mija, someday you're going to be an actress." She told me that we'd live in New York City and I'd be on Broadway and a big star in Hollywood, and we'd wear fur coats and opera gloves and diamond rings, and we'd pull up to the red carpet in our long limousine, and the audience would cheer when they raised the red velvet curtains. My grandmother spoke of our glamorous life like she had lived it, and it seemed we were destined to live a life of luxury and riches, even as we scrubbed the vinyl floors of her grocery store. My grandmother worked hard for her wealth, but she also loved the Texas Lotto. She used to play the lotto like it was her birthright. Scratch-offs, Powerballs. I didn't know how the tickets worked, but I loved helping her with scratch-offs. It felt like anything was possible. When I think of my grandmother, I think of paper towels and her pecan tree and screen doors slamming and those metal tin stars that hung from the ceiling with blue marbles for jewels. And that one time we tried black-eyed peas for New Year's and it did not go well. And my Uncle Jimmy hunting deer in our backyard and lard and corn husks. And there was this large wooden rocking chair on our back porch she would sit in, and tiny gnats crawling over the lace doilies that she covered her round kitchen table in. And there was this tiny mouse that lived behind her stove. And I screamed when I saw it as I jumped up on a chair like an elephant, terrified it was going to get me. She told me, "The mouse is more afraid of you than you are of it." And I told her, "You're wrong." She taught me that you have to wash beans before you cook them because they come from the ground and they're covered in dirt. So we'd strain them and separate the beans from the rocks. She taught me how to make flour tortillas from flour and water, and how to cook them on a comal, and how to grind seasonings with a molcajete, and said if I got hungry, I could melt butter on a tortilla and call it a day. I think of her porcelain dolls with pure white skin, which our systematically racist society trained her to think was beautiful, and her collection of odd-shaped teapots, one being a full-size hen. She owned chickens once, and goats, I think. She always had a dog while I was growing up. It guarded her house, a chow for the longest time, and a gatekeeper who would feed him, who I think was just a homeless man she would feed in exchange for work. Tony was his name. I think of her silver hairbrush and her vanity worthy of princesses, with a matching hand mirror, a makeup tray, and powders I wished I knew how to put on my face. I was getting a little obsessive with the hairbrush, so she warned me that if I brushed my hair 100 times, every strand of my hair would fall out. This woman was wise. While Julia Childs would supposedly start meals with dessert, my grandmother would not go to bed unless she had dessert. We rarely saw my grandmother. The occasional summer visit tied with Thanksgiving and Christmas, when we'd all gather together near San Antonio. My grandmother, my mom, and my two uncles. My Uncle Jimmy would drive a few hours from Kingsville, and my Uncle Joey, who lives in Missouri, the state, not the condition, would join us too, and all their children. I have a vivid memory of one Christmas when my mom had to go into work, and apparently I slept in so late by my family standards that my Uncle Jimmy came into my room and dragged me out of bed by my ankles. I'm sure he found this hilarious. I found this completely disruptive to my emotional state. As an only child with princess-like treatment, this came as a total shock to me. I had never experienced something so horrific. I prayed for my cousins, whom I assumed experienced this daily. My Aunt Maggie, my Uncle Jimmy's beautiful wife with a heart of gold, then forced me to brush my teeth. "I'm going to eat breakfast," I said. "Exactly," she said. "You can't eat all that plaque and bacteria that built up overnight. You need to brush your teeth." And then she refused to feed me until I had brushed them. Ugh. I had to remember where my toothbrush was and find something called toothpaste. I don't think I'd brushed my teeth until then, throughout middle school. Thank God I wasn't a coffee drinker. Then, after this rigorous obstacle course, I was forced to play Monopoly with my Uncle Joey. Ugh, I decided there were far too many rules. I wanted to be the cute little dog, but I ended up being the hat. Somebody else got to be the banker. I suddenly understood why my Uncle Joey was so successful. He was a true businessman. He did not take owning a railroad lightly. One time, we all got together for New Year's. My cousin and I were popping firecrackers, sparklers, pop rocks, but then we moved to the big ones. Naturally, with all of our intelligence, emotional maturity, and the dry Texas brush, we ended up unintentionally setting a fire. Thankfully, my cousin Madeline had the sense to call for help, and my Uncle Jimmy came running in. He stomped the fire out with his cowboy boots, like a true Texan. And that night, I learned what real heroes look like. Typically, we'd all meet at the house my grandmother owned in Bandera, Texas, about 45 minutes to an hour from San Antonio. At a few times in my life, my mother and I lived there as well. It was a mobile home on a plot of land that was several acres. The house had green carpet and high ceilings, with which provided excellent acoustics for my impersonations of the lion in The Wizard of Oz. If I were the king of the forest. Yeah, it was pretty awesome. When we first moved in, I was excited. That was until I learned what a water moccasin was and saw several in our lake. And then I heard about the snake that was in the trees above the hammock. But I pulled up my bootstraps and I rode that lawnmower like I was John Deere. Proud and going far too fast over tree stumps and limestone. We couldn't really see the ground over the grass when we first got there, so we just started mowing. Con paciencia y fe. We learned a lot, like the fact that you could total a mower. The drive to my high school was over an hour each morning, so we'd leave the house around 5 a.m. before the sun had the dignity to rise, and my mom would fuel me with a toasted cinnamon raisin bagel smothered in peanut butter with grape jelly on top. We'd sing and dance in the car so frequently that one of my fellow students asked me to verify if that was indeed us he saw dancing off Ingram Road. I don't think I had the confidence at the time to tell him yes. I was just glad he didn't see us when we were impersonating geese. Sometimes my grandmother would visit us in San Antonio. She loved going to see my mom at work. At the time, my mom worked for Sonic Drive-In. She was the general manager in Boerne, Texas, another small town about 10, 15 minutes from Bandera. She'd have to open the store at 5 a.m., so on weekends, we'd wake up way too early, and I'd sleep in the car until I was ready to come out. There's no indoor restaurant, so I just hang out in the car or on the patio, entertaining myself until I was old enough to be put to work. When my grandmother would visit the store, she'd invite her sister, my Aunt Erlinda, or Linda, who lived in Boerne. They'd sit on the porch and gab while they sipped their iced tea, and I'd try out the roller skates. I was not very good, but for 50 cents extra per hour, I sure did try. Now, the one thing about living in the hill country in Texas is it is dark, like scary dark. Like when you stop at a stop sign in the middle of the night and you look to your right and your left to see if anyone's coming, and they're not, you see nothing. And there's a silence so pure, it drives city folk into madness. The only thing that deafened this silence was the thunderstorms. Everything is bigger in Texas, including thunderstorms. Storms that made King Lear shudder. Loud, booming thunder, wind strong enough to rip roofs off buildings, and lightning to split 100-year-old trees in half. The rain that appears like a woolen blanket you can't quite sift through, a waterfall that seems to pour endlessly onto your windshield so loud that you can't see, and your windshield wipers can't really keep up. You search for those little white stripes on the road and pray no one else is driving right now. On the highway, it's not so bad. I mean, you can follow someone else's brake lights and pray that even if they're wrong, at least you're behind them. In the country, there are no brake lights. Well, not for miles, at least. And the roads are a mix of dirt and loose gravel that you pray stays strong enough for you to get through. It makes you question if the silence and the stars are worth it. It makes you question everything. There was nothing more terrifying than driving at a snail's pace through Texas rain. But there we were, my grandmother in the passenger seat, who now had vision loss due to glaucoma, while 16-year-old Amy, with a permit, vowed to get them home. I think she could tell I was scared. She was probably scared. We talked about God bowling and angels and how they'd protect us, and she prayed loudly about how she trusted Jesus. And we shouted and sang over the storm, almost speaking back to it, making a music no one else would hear. I wouldn't say I was raised religious. Well, we went to church on Christmas, sometimes. Easter Christmas Catholics, I think they call it. But we skipped on the Easter part. We were usually busy hiding or eating chocolate eggs. Though I do think we did our best to make Palm Sunday. That's the one where they give everyone in the congregation a palm leaf when you enter, because something about Jesus riding triumphantly into Jerusalem on a donkey. I don't know. All I knew is that it meant arts and crafts. And this was good news, people. We'd take the single palm leaf and fold it carefully into a cross and hang it over our door for protection. A leaf with the power of God inside it. I didn't really know what the Bible was, but we prayed a lot. My mom taught me the Lord's Prayer and Hail Mary, and we talked to the angels. There were a lot of saints in our house. Pictures, statues, necklaces, coins, and the face of white Jesus was everywhere. It wasn't so much about sin for us as it was two wrongs don't make a right, and you know better. And just because the kid shoved his fingers in your face doesn't give you the right to break one, Amy. I like the little candles they gave you at midnight mass. They have these little collars on them, like the collars dogs get at the vet office to keep them from biting themselves. I wondered why candles needed to be kept from biting themselves until I saw the first drop of wax run down my candle and land on its collar. My least favorite part of going to church was being denied breakfast until after the service. Something about Christ starving in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. Yeah, I don't know. All I knew is by the time church was over, Taco Cabana stopped serving breakfast. So I had to eat lunch. The cashier in the fluorescent pink polo became my prison warden and told me I could not have chorizo and egg, potato and egg, or anything with egg in it. What can I eat? I asked. You can have a bean and cheese taco. Bean and cheese? I looked up at her in horror, and my disbelief had my parents saying, bean and cheese is fine, thank you. As they shot me a look, I prepared myself for burial. Nowadays, Taco Cabana serves breakfast 24 hours a day. 24 hours! But back then, these were dark times. No smartphones, no internet, no potato and egg tacos after noon. It was tragic. Church for me was being forced to wake up too early and sit in an uncomfortable pew while some old white man told me how to live my life. And we'd stand up and we'd sit down and we'd kneel down and we'd say things like, peace be with you. And we'd have to shake hands with random strangers and say, and also with you. And listen to a pastor who was tone deaf singing a bunch of words on a single note. And we'd all get into this long line and be given these circular cardboard toms that I tried to slowly melt on my tongue, as it was the only food I was allowed for 40 days and 40 nights. But we never really talked about church. We went to the service and then we went on with our lives. The first person to ever talk to me about church was my Auntie Vet. She took me to vacation Bible school. I was a little hesitant at first, but she was babysitting me, so I didn't really have a choice. So I went in. Y'all, this place was amazing. We got to sing and dance and make arts and crafts. Oh, this was church? Are you kidding me? Oh, this place is awesome. We got to decorate our own clay pot with these broken pieces of glass that were safe for us to handle for some reason. And we were told how we're all broken, but God brings us together and makes us whole. And we learned Bible songs like, Pharaoh, Pharaoh, oh, baby, let my people go. Yeah. It was a good time. But y'all, I only got to go for one day. Can you believe it? But it was one of the best days of my childhood career. I don't think I understood the whole Jesus dying for our sins part or why people kept saying good news, but arts and crafts and singing, that was good news enough for me. I think my Auntie Vet just knew, you know? There were so many moments throughout my life that stand out because of her. Little moments when something felt important. Designer brands meant a lot in my childhood. And I felt like I was constantly competing with others who could afford the flea market Prada bags and fake perfumes, golden juicy couture jewelry, and Tiffany's. Like breakfast at Tiffany's, Audrey Hepburn and all that. At the time, it felt like everyone in my family had a Tiffany's necklace but me. And then it was my birthday. I was opening my presents. A tiny silver heart shined back at me from a little blue box. I was in awe. My Auntie Vet had gotten me a Tiffany's necklace. It wasn't about the brand. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. It was about what it said, the statement that it made. It was like she was saying, here you go. You are included too. You are allowed to be beautiful. You are allowed to have nice things. It's okay. Every year she'd get me something so nice it made me blush. Each gift so very kind, thoughtful, and generous. Like she was trying to make it all up to me. All the times I felt like I was never enough. It's like she could see me, perhaps even when I couldn't see myself. She always wanted to make sure everyone was having fun. She'd lead us through family games, and for Christmas, she showed the twin baby girls how to toss rings onto the inflatable antlers I was now wearing on my head. Her curly hair bounced as she jumped for joy when they got one on. There you go, see? When she traveled recently, she brought back a bookmark for me. Such a small thing, but it meant so much. It was a replica of a painting called Garden with Sunflowers. On the back it says, which masterpiece are you? Like she wanted to remind me that I too was a masterpiece. My Auntie Vet passed away last May. When I was in the church for her service, I could not stop crying. Looking at her 2 daughters she left behind, her 4 grandchildren, all her friends, the pastor of that church who said his marriage she saved. They said when they asked her how she was always so happy, she'd tell them, that's Jesus. And that was the day I was grateful her grandchildren had been risen in the church. When I saw 5-year-old Charlotte, she told me, Grandma Evie is in heaven, and she's having a party with God. She's eating cupcakes and ice cream. Not too long after, I had a dream about her. She was asking me to help her at a soup kitchen, except instead of soup, we were serving cereal, and the guests were only children. She asked me to make sure the kids who wanted them got marshmallows. There was a moment in the dream I was looking at her, as if in disbelief she was really there. She stopped what she was doing, looked up at me, and asked if I was okay. Yes, I said, and she smiled. I woke up crying. It felt like she wanted me to know she was okay. When I told my mother about the dream, she said, Auntie Vet is helping feed the children in heaven. That seems like something she would do. A few weeks before my aunt passed, we were all together celebrating Easter. That was the same day my little cousin, Charlotte, almost drowned in the pool. None of us knew what was happening until we saw my Auntie Vet jump into the pool to save her in her Easter clothes. The water was freezing. Afterwards, while my aunt went to change, I wrapped Charlotte in several towels as she shuddered from the cold. The dye from the cascarones stained the tile like blood, and later I wondered what would have happened if my aunt had passed away just a few weeks before she did. Not too long after her funeral, her daughter's husband, Kaliki, had a heart attack. Just after losing her mom to a heart attack, my cousin was about to lose her husband and the father of her 2 kids. It enraged me, but it made sense. Kaliki had buried his own mother only a year or so ago, and now he had to bury his second. His heart was ripped in half. It was a miracle he was still alive. After the heart attack, he went into a coma. They didn't know who he'd be after he woke up, if he woke up. That was the first time in a while I physically got on my knees and prayed. I was pissed. Pissed at God, and somehow even more pissed at Kaliki. Don't you dare, I said. I sent him healing everywhere I was. I'd close my eyes and imagine him in the hospital, and I'd give him a lecture. You are going to heal, and you're going to get better, and you're going to go home, and you're going to be there for your family, damn it. At the time, I was helping my mother deliver catering orders for her work. I was waiting for the office to open when 2 external double doors shot open. I looked toward the noise and expected to see someone to accept my delivery. I saw nothing. That's odd. The doors closed. A few minutes ticked past and the doors opened again. Hello? I step forward and take a glance out the doors. I see a large sign. I text my godmother. Nana, what hospital is Kaliki at right now? Methodist hospital, she says. I look back at the sign in disbelief. It was the Methodist hospital. It was staring at me like it was waiting for me to notice. It was as if being closer to him would help my prayers and healing be stronger. So I prayed. A few days later, he got out of the coma, out of the hospital, and home in time for the family to get together for my mom's birthday. No brain damage, no loss of mobility, just his whole self walking around our kitchen eating tortilla chips covered in ground beef and Velveeta cheese. When I see him, I hug him and try not to let the tears stream down my face. It was my grandmother who taught me the power of prayer and healing. You see, there was this time I got so sick I didn't think I was going to make it, and I watched as my grandmother covered me head to toe in this magic ointment that I believe is called Vicks. She put it behind my ears, on my chest, my hands, my feet. She felt like a shaman working carefully as I heard her whisper words I didn't know, making signs of the cross over my body. She told me that the power of Jesus' blood heals and that his blood ran in me, so as long as I believed in him, I could heal myself. I was willing to try anything at this point, so I prayed and I went to sleep. When the morning came, my fever broke and I was back to scream singing on the patio in my snowman slippers. Healing seems to run in our family. My mother says that my great-great-grandmother was a shaman, Grandma Rosa. I never knew her, but my mom still has her picture. My uncle Hector was a healer as well. He'd visit people in the hospitals. Though we didn't talk much about church, my mother and grandmother always spoke to me about spirits, ancestors, angels. We believed in angels, archangels, and always felt like someone was looking out for us. When I was very little, I was over at my Aunt Linda's house for a visit. This was also where my great-grandmother Elvira lived. My cousin Gary was babysitting me, and I remember an ambulance coming to the house. I didn't really know why, but he suggested we hang out in the front room. I remember sitting in this window area chatting and laughing. It wasn't until much later that I realized my great-grandmother had passed away while we were there. The ambulance was there to recover her body. Gary kept me entertained while they wheeled her away through the back door. A few days later, back at home, I went up the stairs to go to my room, and I saw her, plain as day, standing at the top of the staircase. I screamed and ran past her to my parents' room. "It's your great-grandma," my mom said. "She just wanted to see you again. She wanted to make sure you're okay. She wanted to say goodbye." I carefully tiptoed out of the room and peeked out at the now empty stairwell. "She's gone," I said. "Let's pray for her," my mother said. And we did. My mom explained how sometimes spirits have trouble crossing over to the other side. "It's all right, Grandma," she told her. "You can go now. We're safe." I never saw her again. My grandmother and my mother were very spiritual, and at one point, my mother had a spiritual shop of her own. It was a metaphysical business where they did healings, cleansings, and sold things like herbs and crystals. She taught me all about Jericho flowers and oracle cards and the light versus the dark, good versus evil, spiritual warfare, angels, and protection. I loved it. I really started to get into all of it. But then one day, this man came to the shop. It felt like a scene straight out of a movie. It was as if the lighting changed and it suddenly became darker. A flicker of light blared through his blue eyes, and they seemed to pierce right through my soul. I was terrified. My mom said I closed myself off entirely and swore to never dabble in the spiritual realm again. But when I was in college, I began to see things again. In the corner of my eyes, flashes of a person, someone in the mirror, lights flickering. I'd hear seemingly specific songs and their lyrics on the radio. So I called my mother. She told me it was my ancestors trying to talk to me. "They don't mean you any harm," she said. "They just have messages for you. Just ask them. Tell them, 'Hello, I see you. I'm ready to listen. What is your message?' And listen." And so I did. I think we all have angels, ancestors walking with us, but there is one particular family member I know watches over me and my mom. His name is Claudio. When he was younger, Claudio's family used to go back to Mexico every Easter, but one year Claudio told his mother he wouldn't be joining them this time. "What do you mean, Claudio? Of course you'll be joining us." A few weeks later, he drowned in the river. He too seemed to have trouble crossing over to the other side. When he was alive, as him and his brothers would walk home from school, he would kick their heels as a joke. After he passed, his brothers could still feel their heels being kicked with no one in sight. "It's okay, Claudio," they said. "It's time for you to move on. We're okay. You can go now." When my mom was living alone in Florida, she kept having all these issues with water around her house. She'd walk in, and there'd be little splashes of water in the hallway, all over the counters. She'd try to sit and focus on work, and she'd hear the water dispenser gurgle. The pipes in the walls would start unexpectedly. When she moved to Austin, same thing. "What is going on?" she'd say. "What is it with the water?" And then she realized it was Claudio, watching over her like a guardian angel, giving her a little nudge when it was time for her to close her laptop and stop working for the evening, blessing her new home and its floors with his feet. Every time something important happens in our family, it rains, like a baptism. We think of it like a blessing. Anytime something strange happens with water, we take it as a sign from Claudio. I found the newspaper article from his accident. The article says he was playing with 3 other teenage boys in Cibolo Creek in Bernie. The creek, they said, had been dry for years due to drought, but they had a windfall of rain and the levels rose quickly. The boys had built a raft and were playing in the newfound river when Claudio fell in. His playmates tried to bring him to the surface, and when they couldn't, they called for help. Volunteer firemen rushed to the scene, the sheriff's department, city police, and others. They retrieved his body by tying a rope around him and declared him dead at 2:10 in the afternoon. He was 15 years old. His brothers, Junior and Hector, were aged 11 and 17, respectively. I wondered, were they the other boys with him at the time? Or did they find out what happened later? Their eldest brother, Oscar, wasn't home. He was in Germany, serving the U.S. Army at age 19. After Gladio died, the Red Cross negotiated to have Oscar come home to be with his family, and he was honorably discharged from the Army in 1957, the same year Gladio passed. His sister, my grandmother Aurora, was 21. I can only imagine how this event has shaped everyone in my family. After leaving the military, my Uncle Oscar joined the Kendall County Sheriff's Department, maybe to prevent other little boys from drowning in the river. My Uncle Junior ended up serving in the military as well. He served as a parachuter in the Vietnam War. They dropped him somewhere in enemy territory to get a lay of the land, but he was stuck in a tree. Instead of someone helping him down, they sprayed him with Agent Orange, amongst other things. He came home in a wheelchair, paralyzed from the waist down and nonverbal. When he got home from the war, his wife put him on a train and left him to die. Thankfully, the people at the train station knew my grandmother. So when they found his license on him, they called her and said, "Aurora, we have your brother." She drove the hours to get him and immediately took him to the Veterans Hospital. He was dehydrated, malnourished. After he recovered, she took him home. "He's my brother. I'll take care of him." So she did. She lifted him in and out of bed into his wheelchair, bathed him, clothed him, and fed him. When I'd visit them, I'd sit with him in front of the television, and we'd watch old funny shows in black and white like I Love Lucy and The Three Stooges. We watched Sister Act religiously, and he loved Home Alone 1, 2, and 3. We'd sit there for hours and laugh and laugh. I think this was my grandmother's way of giving him the best life possible, one full of laughter. Sometimes I'd talk to him, tell him all my troubles as I held the giant purple plush bunny my mother gave me for Easter. "Do you want to hold the bunny, Uncle Junior?" I placed the bunny in his arms and talked to him about my dog and my life back at home. He just smiled. When my grandmother was no longer able to lift him out of bed, she reluctantly moved him into the closest veteran care hospital a few hours away. She would visit him as often as she could, ensure he was getting proper care and grooming, and she'd give the nurses a piece of her mind if he wasn't. He stayed there until he passed in 2011 at age 65. I think this is when my grandmother started to decline. She moved into her store and sold the house behind it where she lived with Uncle Junior. Instead, she lived in a small bedroom behind the cash register. She had a guest room in the back of the store, which is where I stayed with my best friend when we decided to come up to Sanderson to visit her with my mom. I think we were freshmen in college. We were giddy as ever, and it felt like our 14-year-old sleepovers all over again, except there were all these flying bugs like moths in our bedroom that were drawn to the ceiling fan light, which we were keeping on because we were not going to bed anytime soon. And I was making a game out of singing, killing as many bugs as possible, chancla in hand. It was war, and we were winning, so we told ourselves. We fought long and hard until we tuckered ourselves out, turned off the light, and finally melted into sleep. We woke the next day to find out that the wall we were smashing bugs on had another side, which had shelves on it littered with priceless glass antiques that had since been shattered. My grandmother was not amused. I don't remember why, but at some point I said to my grandma, joking, laughing, as if she was one of the girls, "You're crazy, Grandma." Her face changed, and I immediately knew I had done something wrong. She exploded. "I'm not crazy! How dare you call me crazy? I am not crazy!" My grandmother had never gotten upset with me before. Not really. Definitely not like that. I didn't know what to think. I moved on. We moved on. ate a meal somewhere, went back home. But this wasn't the end of it. Not for us and not for her. End of Act 1. Act 2. Alzheimer's disease is a progressive brain disorder. Essentially, these plaques and twisted neurofibers cause a decline in the levels of brain chemicals. Brain cells begin to die, and brain functions with them. Nearly 7 million Americans have it, and the number increases daily. Over time, the disease causes memory loss, confusion, language issues, and behavioral changes. It's irreversible, worsens over time, and is not a normal part of aging, though it can feel like it. And the worst part is those diagnosed with it lose their ability to be self-aware, so they can't fully process what's happening to them. It's up to others around them to see, to notice that they aren't quite the same. Forgetting things is a normal part of aging, forgetting names or missing an appointment, losing your keys, misplacing items, but in time, the name you are looking for should come back to you. You might not be able to find the word you're looking for right now. It's on the tip of your tongue, but you'll get there eventually. When things don't come back, then it might be time to see a doctor. Mood changes, changes in behavior. For example, someone who's very clean and tidy, suddenly leaving stacks of mail untouched, dishes in the sink. Or someone who is a chef, having trouble following a familiar recipe. Driving somewhere and then forgetting where you are going or why is a common sign of aging, but there is a point when it gets too far. It's tricky. It's terrifying. It makes you feel crazy. It's like something's missing and you don't know what. It's like you're sad and you don't know why, and you keep trying to recall part of your mind that is just gone. My grandma stopped remembering to take her pills. My mom would ask her, "Mom, did you take your pills? Mom, did you eat? You need to eat." My grandmother became depressed and paranoid. She'd say someone was stealing from her when there was nothing missing. She forgot to pay the taxes on our house in Bandera, so we had to foreclose our home, sell most of the land, and move into another mobile home on the same property. I remember us going through everything in the house to decide what to keep and what to sell. My mother had to break her store lease and sell everything in her shop. She planned to move everything into our new home and just do readings there. She put everything into storage while we waited for the new house to arrive. But when she came back to pick it all up, I guess she hadn't paid her bill, so there everything was, for sale in their shop. Apparently, anyone who didn't pay their storage fee had their items moved to their shop for sale. So I watched as she carefully chose which items to keep. There was this piece of an old tree that someone had carved the face of Jesus into that my grandmother gave to her. This was one of the items. A few jars of herbs, and I'm not sure what else. My mom started to see that something was going on with my grandmother, so she helped her close her grocery store in Sanderson and moved her down to live with her in Bandera. Everything my grandmother had ever built was gone. My mom went back to work, of course. She worked a lot, so my grandmother stayed at home. My mom gave her careful instructions. She'd leave her food in the fridge and tell her when she'd be home. But when my mom would get home, she'd find my grandmother sobbing on the couch. "Mom, what's wrong?" "You left me. I didn't know where you were." "I was at work, Mom. I told you I'll be home by 6. "No, you didn't. No, you didn't." And so it went. Again and again, my mother would go to work and come home to my grandmother crying, thinking she'd been abandoned. She'd call my mom a liar again and again, and then my mom finally realized she needed to take her to see a doctor. Something was happening, though she couldn't quite figure out what. While they were at the doctor doing the tests, my grandmother kept telling the doctors, "I need to get to Julio. I need to get home and make his dinner. Why are you keeping me here? I need to get to Julio." Julio was my grandfather's name. He'd been dead over 20 years at this point. Then she started asking for her brother, Junior. How do you explain to someone that their brother is dead? When you're hurting, you look for healing any way you can. Sure, you'll try medicine, but true pain opens you to a new level of healing. You learn about things like Reiki, EMDR, sound bowls, breath work, yoga, and you watch as your mother rubs an egg around your body, making signs of the cross. When she cracks the egg into a glass, she points out the different peaks, and you notice that one of the bubbles looks like the dog from The Nightmare Before Christmas. This is significant to you because it reminds you of your dog who has passed. There is a woman well known in the holistic world named Louise Hay. She has a book called You Can Heal Your Life. In her book, she explains her theory that all disease is dis-ease in the body, that all sickness is just a physical manifestation of what is happening inside, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. In the book, she has a list of ailments and explains what she believes causes them. This isn't meant to shame you, but to bring your attention and awareness to what your body is trying to tell you. Instead of just taking a Tylenol when you have a headache and telling your body to shut up, she suggests you listen to your body. What is the headache trying to make you aware of? She says headaches are from invalidating the self, self-criticism, fear. For each ailment, she also lists an affirmation she invites you to say or write down until the affliction goes away. You can't just say them, you have to believe them until they are true. For a headache, she suggests, I love and approve of myself. I see myself and what I do with the eyes of love. I am safe. A lot of the affirmations she suggests are, all is well, I love myself, I am safe. I keep it in my phone as a means of reference. She says cancer is a deep hurt, long-standing resentment, a deep secret or grief eating away at the self, carrying hatred or a feeling of, what's the use? Before she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, my grandmother had ovarian cancer. It felt out of the blue, and my mother took her to all her doctor's appointments. There was an unspoken hurt between them. My grandmother had never really acknowledged what happened in my mother's childhood and how she called her a liar when, as a child, she came to her seeking support, help, and understanding. They had a long conversation, and when my grandmother returned next to the doctor, they told her her cancer was gone. It never returned. In the book, Louise Hay says Alzheimer's is a refusal to deal with the world as it is. Hopelessness, helplessness, anger. Her affirmation is, there is always a new and better way for me to experience life. I forgive and release the past. I move into joy. It didn't get much better from there. Little things we had noticed before, like when she used the wrong name for someone, worsened. And my mom knew she couldn't take care of her on her own. She put her in a senior living center in Kingsville so she could be near my Uncle Jimmy. My mom moved to Florida. She didn't seem to be able to be in San Antonio much longer after that. My Uncle Jimmy and my Aunt Maggie took over care from there. My Aunt Maggie knew my grandmother's hair was very important to her, so she would visit her and do her hair. She kept dyeing her hair for a long time until, I suppose, she couldn't anymore. The grandkids used to sing to her. They'd even take her out occasionally to eat or bring her over at the house for family gatherings. They sent us a picture once of her holding somebody's baby. That seemed to make her happy. It was a while before my mother and I visited her. We didn't really know what to expect. I think it terrified us. The first time we visited my grandmother, she was still relatively coherent. She didn't know who I was, but she knew my mother. She thought my mother was there to take her home. We allowed her to think we were packing up her bags as we collected all the stuffed animals and blankets she had won at bingo. The staff had apparently asked someone in the family to pick these up because my grandmother was lining them up on top of her bedroom light, and there were so many it was becoming a fire hazard. When my mom explained who I was, my grandmother let me take a picture with her in front of the fireplace the staff had decorated for Christmas. The stockings didn't have names, they just said things like mother, father. I figured it was the last time I would ever see her. And then years later, my mother had a dream that my grandfather drove up to the house looking for my grandmother, like he was picking her up. My mom told him to go away. You could not take her yet. She took it as a sign that my grandmother's time was coming soon, so she told me she was going to visit, and did I want to come with her? I said yes. I'd never wanted to do that on her own. When I was a kid, my mom used every opportunity she could to get me presents. Birthday and Christmas, of course, but Valentine's Day, Easter, she always had something for me when I woke up. I truly don't know how she did it. I'd get into the car for school, and there would be a large purple bunny waiting to be loved by me, a box of chocolates, balloons. My mother made me feel so very special. So when she got divorced for the second time, I wanted to do something for her to help her feel less alone. For the first time in years, she was living alone in Florida while I lived in Minnesota. Mother's Day was coming up, so I used it as an opportunity to do something special. I bought her a Build-A-Bear and named it Angel. So you always have an angel with you, I said. I dressed it in pajamas and had it programmed so that when you squeezed the hand, it said, I love you, in this little voice. I wanted her to know that no matter what, she was loved and she was never alone. It was the least I could do. When we decided we were going to visit my grandma, it was difficult to choose what to wear, what to bring. Do you bring flowers? A card? I scoured my wardrobe and never really found anything that made sense. I landed on a t-shirt and jeans. I checked my jewelry box. Recently, for Halloween, my best friend Josie and I had dressed up like fairies. For her costume, she placed butterflies in her hair. They were the same ones I used to sell with my grandmother at the market. Where did you get those? I said. At the end of the night, she gifted me one. So you can always remember, she said. Anytime I need a little extra magic, I'd wear it. Opening nights, special events, it was how I could bring my grandmother with me. That day, I found it staring at me from one of my shelves. Should I bring it? Would she recognize it? Would she remember? It was a test, and a terrifying one at that. What if she did? What if she didn't? I've never placed so much hope on an object. So I placed it in my hair and went to my mother's room. Are you ready? She said. Without her noticing, I grabbed the teddy bear I had gifted her from her chair. Ready, I said. We got in the car and started our 2.5-hour drive. We didn't really know what to say. We just kind of sat there in silence. If we talked, it was about anything and everything except what we were about to do. My mother drove. We left in the morning. When we arrived, 2 women greeted us at the front door. Can we help you? I'm here to see my mother. Last name? Abrigo. Aurora Abrigo. How do you spell that? Abrigo. Abrigo. We waited in silence as the 2 women exchanged glances. We don't have any patience with that name here. My stomach and my chest seemed to meld together. Aurora Abrigo. She's here. This is the place. Where is she? I watched with bated breath as the 2 women tried to calm my mother down. I was having my own panic attack inside. Did she die before we got there and they carted her off and deleted her from their system and their memories? Were we too late? Where is my mother? Ma'am, we've never had any patience with that name. Are you sure you're at the right location? Of course I am. This is the address my brother gave me. I knew better than to contradict my mother. There is another center down the road. Is it possible that's where she is? There was a pause. This happens all the time. It's just down the road. Mom, do you have the address? This place doesn't look super familiar to me. It's clear at this point that my mom is in full, "Why are you not letting me see my mother, who I drove 3 hours to see," rage mode. She exhales deeply and double checks the address. She grumbles something under her breath about it being the wrong place, and we leave embarrassed. The two women try to wish us a nice day, and we drive down the road to the nearly identical looking building. The parking lot looked empty, and I wondered if it was open. We had to put a code in order to unlock the front door. The code was posted on a sign just next to the door explaining that this was a safety measure so patients didn't wander. We punched in the code and entered an eerily quiet and empty lobby. No women to greet us. No front desk, just a small kiosk in the far corner of the room that I drew my mom's attention to. We clicked check in and then entered my grandmother's name as the patient we were there to see. We scanned our IDs and the little machine printed out name tags with our photos for both of us to wear. What next? I thought. Where is she? We cautiously began to wander the halls, hoping not to disturb anyone. Still no humans in sight. Where was everyone? Did anyone work here? Hello? We turned a corner to a liminal hallway and took one brave foot in front of the other. An older woman in a wheelchair walked herself forward with her feet like a child in an office chair. She held a doll close as if it was her child and spoke words I didn't understand. We walked past her and turned another corner. At the very end of the hallway was a desk. Behind it was a woman mid-bite. Oh, hello? Looking for someone? Aurora. Oh, Miss Abrigo? She's right there. We turned around to find my grandmother's room just across the way. It was a shared room. Her roommate was behind a closed curtain, occasionally mumbling to herself with items piled around her as if her entire 3-story house had been consolidated into half of a hospital room. She had furniture, a TV. My grandmother, on the other hand, looked like a living shrine. She lay in bed with her eyes closed and her hands over her stomach, the fluorescent light on above her giving her this kind of angelic glow. She was too beautiful and peaceful to be disturbed, but we woke her up anyway. Hi, Mom, my mother said. My grandmother opened her eyes and smiled. Hi. She seemed a little caught off guard. When she got up, she noticed she wasn't in pajamas, but in a t-shirt and oversized jeans. A tired old belt held them up around her waist. She grabbed them and pulled them up, a little confused as to why she was wearing pants that didn't fit her. Perhaps they were the ones she had on when she checked in. Perhaps they used to fit her. Perhaps they felt familiar, so she kept them on. My uncle said they tried to give her new pants that do fit her, but she always chose to wear these. I wondered if I would do the same. She sat up and began to visit with us. She didn't really know who we were or what to say. Are you visiting from out of town? Yes. Oh, where are you from? We came from San Antonio. Oh, wow, she said. There's so much traffic there. Yes, we said. And so it went on a few times. Same questions. Where are you from? San Antonio. Traffic. After our short chat, my mother turned and pointed at the butterfly in my hair. Did you see what she has in her hair, Mom? Oh! I slowly passed the butterfly over to her, and my mom and I held our breath as we watched her grasp it between her fingers. Oh, how nice. She didn't remember. She handed it back. I could see the light slowly fading from my mother's eyes. My grandmother looked up at us as if it was the first time. Are you friends of Henrietta? Henrietta is my mother's name. My mother, who was at this moment sitting directly across from my grandmother. She didn't recognize her, but at least she remembers she has a daughter, and that her name is Henrietta. She thought I was one of her school friends. When I was in college, I did an internship in a memory care unit. This was before I knew about my grandmother. I helped the recreation director come up with activities to keep the seniors entertained. We helped them get in a circle and kick a beach ball back and forth to each other. There was a woman named Ruth who would play the piano absolutely beautifully if you asked her to. And we'd make them mock pina coladas. And a woman would visit every now and then and paint her mother's nails, even though her mother had no clue who she was. Different patients sometimes had repetitive behaviors or questions they would ask, like where their husband was or if they could go make coffee. I always wondered what mine would be. I kept my hair short at the time and wore pants, so whenever I held the door open for an older woman, she would very loudly say to my manager, "What a nice young boy." But the most painful was Edna. Edna didn't come out much. She mainly stayed in her room, but you could occasionally bring her coffee and some cookies and stay for a visit. She didn't really react to the words you were saying, but she still seemed to enjoy the company nonetheless. No one ever visited Edna. Another gentleman loved to talk about cars, so he'd stare out the window down to the parking lot and go on about carburetors. And they'd all make jokes pretending the mocktails were real. And even the folks in the wheelchairs had a blast trying to hit the beach balls with their hand or foot. We'd all laugh, and I never felt so grateful to be there for someone who really didn't have anyone. Too painful for family to visit, I thought. So when we were with my grandmother, I felt like I had a few more tools in my belt when it came to having a conversation. "Are you friends of Henrietta?" Yes, we are." "Oh, she must be at school." "Yes, we were just stopping by to say hello." "Oh, how nice." "Yes." We sat in silence, and then I remembered the bear. "We brought you this." "Oh, look at that. Oh, how cute." She smiled and looked at it like it was gold. She fluffed its little pajamas and smoothed down its collar. She had never seen such beautifully tailored clothes on a bear before. "Oh, would you look at that?" she kept saying. She was mesmerized. She couldn't stop smiling. "And look," I said, "press here." I moved her hand over its paw and gently pressed. "I love you. I love you." "Oh, would you look at that?" She nuzzled the bear into her chest and smiled. Before we left, my mother took a Sharpie and wrote her name and room number on the chest of the bear. Apparently, there was an issue of things getting taken by other patients occasionally. Not out of malice, but just for the fact that no one really knows what's theirs and what isn't. And dolls and bears are very popular. We told my grandmother it was time for us to go, and she said she would walk us out. She moved slowly, but we walked together. She took my arm for support, and I was allowed to hold on to her as we walked in silence. It felt like she knew, for a moment, who we were, that we were there, how much we loved her, and she let me hold her hand. It was such a gift to hold her, to be with her, and we walked. When we got to the front, we said our goodbyes, and she thanked us for coming. We smiled and waved and carefully made sure the door latched behind us. We walked a few steps out of view from the building. I looked at my mother and we started to sob. We held each other, crying, grieving, grateful to have each other, grateful for the visit, but torn apart from it, wishing we could do more. "I'm glad you brought the bear," my mother said through her tears. "Me too." We decided to wind down by going to the local TJ Maxx and walking around. Shopping was always therapeutic for us, anything to not think about what we just experienced. We grabbed some essential oils, stopped for food, and hopped in the car for the 3-hour drive home. I asked my mom if she was okay driving. She wasn't. I drove us home. I'm proud of you, I said. That was really, really hard. But she's safe, and she's okay, and she loves you. I thought she was going to remember the butterfly, she said. Me too. I can't believe she remembered the traffic. Who could forget traffic in San Antonio? We cried more, and my mom told me she was grateful that her mother didn't remember all the trauma that happened in her life. She told me stories about my grandmother growing up. She talked about when she started showing signs. She told me that any of my grandmother's decisions the last 10 years of her life prior to her diagnosis had been rendered invalid by the government, that all of her assets were now being used to fund her stay at the living center. Well, I said, that's good that she's being taken care of. Yeah, she said. And we drove. I never thought I'd visit her again. Didn't know how much longer she had, but also didn't know if I wanted to risk a different visit. This one went so perfectly in my mind. But when my uncle called my mom and said they didn't think she was going to make it, I asked my boyfriend to drive with me so I could see her one last time. Apparently, she had fallen and broken her hip, so they weren't letting her walk anymore. She was in a wheelchair just for safety, as Alzheimer's can affect your balance, and they thought another fall could be fatal. When she was in the hospital for her hip, they had to put her on a feeding tube, but she didn't know where she was, so she kept trying to rip it out. We decided so last minute my mom couldn't come and my uncle was out of town. We got there later than expected, and I was half worried the visiting hours would be over, but they weren't. We found the place all right, and I carefully placed my boyfriend's sticker name tag on his chest. He held my hand as I choked back tears already swelling in my throat. It had been a while since I last saw her. Would I remember where she was? When you walk in just past the main lobby is the cafeteria. I looked over and saw a woman asleep in her chair at a table with a glass in front of her. That's not her, I said, and I followed my memory towards her room. I peeked in. The bed was empty. Are you looking for Aurora? Yes. She's in the cafeteria. We heard a glass fall over. I looked at my boyfriend and we started to walk back. A nurse came by quickly, pushing the same woman we saw in the cafeteria past us. It was her. I didn't recognize her at first, but the nurse brought her into her room and closed the door behind her. She had spilled food on her clothes, so the nurse was changing her. I didn't recognize her. I didn't recognize her. When they let us in the room, she was curled up in her bed like a child. She seemed upset, like the fluorescent light above her was keeping her awake when she wanted to sleep, so I turned it off. I tried talking to her, but she couldn't seem to keep her eyes open. I wanted to talk to her so desperately. My boyfriend waited outside the room so I could have some time with her. I tucked her into her covers and looked over on her shelf. Photos of our family littered her bedside, and that's when I spotted it. The bear. All those years ago, and there it was. I grabbed it and placed it carefully in her arms. I kneeled beside her and held her. I love you, Grandma, I said, and I kissed her forehead. She giggled at this and smiled, her eyes still closed. I love you so much. We left her to rest and got back in the car. I sobbed and my boyfriend did his best to comfort me. We got food and drove 3 hours back home. My grandmother told us a joke once. It was one of those man walks into the bar jokes, except I think it was a priest, a rabbi, and a Mexican man. They were asked which one of them would win a fight and what they would do. I don't remember what the other men said, but the Mexican man said he knew judo. The others were surprised and a little impressed. You know judo, they said. Wow. He said, yeah. You don't know if I got a knife. You don't know if I got a gun. You don't know. I never saw her laugh so hard. When I began writing about her, I wanted to learn more about her disease, and it just so happened that the Alzheimer's Association had free classes. They still do. We learned about dementia being an umbrella term with Alzheimer's falling under it, and I signed up for several classes, but only went to one. I learned my instructor was a volunteer and that her husband and several of her family members had passed due to Alzheimer's. When she asked us to go around and say why we were there, I tried to hold back my tears as a gentleman said he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's and was there to learn more about his disease. When he raised his hand later to ask a question, it took him some time to articulate what he was trying to say. He explained how he used this little notepad for reminders that he kept with him all the time and relied on the GPS to keep him focused on where he was supposed to be driving. At the class, I learned there was a 5K coming up soon. The walk to end Alzheimer's. It was free, so I asked my boyfriend and parents to go with me. We got there a little late and noticed everybody had these different colored flowers. The announcer asked everyone to lift up their flowers, one at a time, color by color, as he explained what they meant. If you have an orange flower, he said, you are a supporter of a future without Alzheimer's. If you are holding a yellow flower, it means you are one of the millions of caregivers giving more than your time to others. If you have a blue flower, you are someone living with Alzheimer's. Look around you, he said, and I looked around at the families and knew their pain. Now I want those with a purple flower to raise them into the air. We watched as hundreds and hundreds of purple flowers were held into the air. If you are holding a purple flower, it means you have lost someone to Alzheimer's. And he prayed for them and for all of us there that day. I felt the tears streaming down my face and my mom's as I held her hand. The announcer could barely get through his own tears as he continued speaking messages of hope. There is one more flower we hope to someday have, he said. It is a white flower. A white flower will be held by the first survivor. The crowd cheered, and I felt this little ping of hope inside me. I learned there are many ways to lower your risks of getting the disease. It's a lot of the usual things doctors tell you. Get enough sleep, manage stress, be a lifetime learner, stay connected with others, eat a healthy diet, and exercise regularly. There are some medications which might slow symptoms down, but there's currently no cure for Alzheimer's disease. However, in November of last year, Proposition 14 passed in Texas, authorizing a $3 billion investment to create the Dementia Prevention and Research Institute of Texas, bringing hope and resources to San Antonio and the entire state. Therapies and medications are advancing, and clinical trials are available. There is hope. There are resources. You are not alone. When I was younger, probably in my teens, my mom shared an old family video with me on VHS. For those of you who don't know, a VHS is a large tape, bigger than a cassette tape, about as large as an average Bible. And you'd put it inside of this thing called a VCR, and it would play back the video that had been recorded on it using a video camera. I know. I wondered what was on it. It seemed to be some kind of family gathering. I watched as a dashing man in a military uniform walked into the room. People cheered, and he smiled with charisma. Who was that? I took a closer look. Pause, rewind, play, pause. the smile, so familiar. I asked my mom, "Mom, who is that?" "That's your Uncle Junior." Before the accident, he was tall, strong, and ready to sweep someone off the dance floor. I let the video play and I noticed a woman holding a baby, so close, afraid to release it from her embrace. The woman held the baby with so much love, all the love you always wish you had in moments when you are cold and lost in the sea of your darkest emotions. Wow, who is that woman? That's your grandmother. And who is the baby? That's you. Today is my grandmother's 90th birthday. She's still alive. In fact, we're going to visit her this weekend to wish her a happy birthday. I know she may not know who she is or where she is, but I hope she knows she is loved. I hope she knows she is not alone. I hope she knows we are all rooting for her. And I hope that when she sees the bear at the foot of her bed, she remembers, even just for a moment, that someone loves her. End of play.
Well, unfortunately, that was more than a one tissue. So excuse me, because I have a job to do. I'm so honored to do. Again, Amy asked me to host because not only is this story true and moving, it's a piece of art that we all got to listen to tonight.
Thank you. Ooh, take your time. Take your time.
So we have a couple moments to think about what I always ask after you witness something artistic. How did you like it? Did you not like it? Could have used more. Could have used more laughs. Could have used more. But was it meaningful? What was meaningful? I know I'm taking my time, so I don't expect any of you to share that, but it's something to think about tonight. So what was meaningful? What was memorable? Especially a play about memory. It's a special question to ask. As you hold that question, if you'd like to ask something, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. And
Woo.
now I can see you.
There's people.
And while you think about that, Amy, if you'd like,
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about the intent of writing this piece?
Yes. So this piece has been in the works for a couple years now, actually. So when I first thought of it, it was after the visit with my grandmother that me and my mom had. I was like, this is a one-act play by itself. Like just that visit felt like an entire show on its own. And so that was really what inspired me. And I tend to process a lot of my emotions, trauma, grief by writing. It's just like I need to get it out, need to get it on paper. And so when I applied for the grant, that was originally all that was in the play. And then when I started writing, it's funny, I thought, I hope it's long enough. I said, I don't know if this is going to be enough. And I had never written a one-person show. So when I looked at the page numbers, typically one page would be 1 minute, but that's totally different if it's a one person. Anyway, and it's 2 hours, right? But my intent was to honor her memory, to process my own stuff, and to share these stories that go away when we go away. I mean, there's so many stories we have inside us. It's amazing. And I thought, who's going to know about my Uncle Jimmy, pretending to be electrocuted? Who's going to know about my Aunt Maggie teaching me to brush my teeth? Like, just me, and maybe them, but it was probably a millisecond in their memory. And so I just wanted to share those stories and remind everyone, to be grateful, but to inspire people to speak their own stories and share stories with each other, because that's how we keep each other alive in our own way. So, and yeah, that was my intent.
I'm curious, there are actually two books. One, where do you expect this to go from here as a story to continue or not? And secondly, where do you expect to go with future kinds of efforts?
That's great. I'll repeat it just for folks to hear again, especially on the live stream.
Yes.
Two great questions. Where do you hope this piece goes next? And then where do you hope you go creatively too? Yeah.
That's all right. Yeah. So this piece, excuse me, it's interesting because I was thinking like it can adapt and change based on what comes next, or I could set it in stone as like this piece always takes place on January 15th, right? As a play would be repeated every time. However, it was my intent when I wrote the grant was to be able to workshop it, do this reading, and then be able to possibly tour it to different locations. Because it is a one-person show, that makes it a lot easier to do. So it would be a process of having rehearsal, so I'd be memorized. Maybe we'd be able to add things like sound and costume. Don't necessarily need a set, right? But just being able to be a little more present with the audience. And so that would be the next steps for this, would be like looking at touring, continuing to refine the script. And once it gets performed, usually a few times, then you would start looking at publishing it, because you wouldn't want to like set it in stone until you feel like, oh, that's how it flows. That's where it goes. So that's what would be next for Aurora, for the play. For me creatively, I'm actually excited because there's grant applications coming up. And I actually wrote a children's musical that's an adaptation of a story called Once Upon a Time, that's about a young vampire who's a vegetarian. And he loves candy and he wants to go trick-or-treating for Halloween because he finds out that humans give away candy for free on Halloween. And he's like, this is the best thing ever. And they're like, but you need a costume. And he's like, nuts. So it's a really cute story. And so creatively, that's where my next mental focus goes for trying to apply for a grant to hopefully produce, have musicians and singers who will be able to do a reading of it, sing the songs, and also record, so that we could then pitch that to a theater company like the Magic or Children's Theater Company, so that they could produce it fully. I'm also, in February, I'll be continuing on tour with the Magic Theater. I'm in their production of Red Riding Hood. I'm the big bad wolf, as you can see. What a nice boy. So I'll be continuing with that. And that's really special because we get to go to elementary schools and bring it to the kids. So I love that as well. Yeah.
It's an excellent question that I usually frame towards the end of the talk back. So fantastic job. Another way that she continues, right, is through this grant, hopefully the next one you get, and also through our support, being here and you'll see in your program other ways that you might support and learn about Amy's work too.
Yes.
Any other thoughts as we wrap up? Yes, and then yes, and then we'll, and then yes. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, yes.
Well, this is a very personal play for you, but it's also very personal for your family. What did they say?
Well,
how did they take it?
I haven't talked to them yet. This was definitely, I mean, it was very scary, the whole process of knowing what to include and if it was okay. And, the growing up is like, you didn't tell secrets to nobody, right? And you didn't talk about your feelings. And I'm just like, la, la, la. So we'll see. But I was scared, I was like, oh, how's my family going to feel? Are they going to, disown me forever? And I thought, if they're my family, if they love me, they'll forgive me. They might get angry, and that's okay. And maybe they have something to get angry about. Maybe they have something that they need to work on that they learned in the play, and it helped them in some way. So I'll find out. I think my Uncle Jimmy and Maggie are on the live stream because they're 3 hours away.
We'll see what the comments say.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll check the comments. When you get home, you can watch the live stream. That's not true. That's not true. I'm just kidding. But yes.
I was fascinated with a lot of the things that you brought up that you experienced as a child. I did also. And one of my favorite things, of course, was my grandma de las tortillas with butter.
Yes.
And I always got the first one.
Oh.
So I was there.
Oh.
Sorry.
You're okay. It's okay.
But also, when she got to a point to where my mom couldn't care for her anymore, and she was in a nursing home. I think I should write a play about this.
Do it.
I never knew who I was going to be, where I was going to be, or what we were going to be doing. Sometimes I was my mother. Sometimes I was my cousin. Sometimes, it was another relative or whatever. A lot of times she thought I was my mom. And so we would look out at the window and el caballo blanco, qué bonito, the beautiful white horse next to the windmill, because that's what she grew up with. That's the rancho that she grew up with. And so she would ask me, should we go outside? Vamos a ver el caballo. I was like, let's go.
Let's go.
And she'd sit there and go, yeah, let's go. And that was it. So, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yes. It's a lot.
It's such
Thank
a
you.
sensory experience. I was talking to someone during the intermission that in addition to performing live, I hope that you're able to record it in a really beautiful way, because the storytelling is so personal to you, and because it's so specific, it's so I was watching my family, watching my childhood.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think you were next. Yeah.
Okay. I really appreciate how the whole first act didn't even touch on dementia. Because when someone has dementia, the whole family gets it. And you helped us build this world to see and understand the extent of what was lost. And this is a beautiful memoir tribute. I mean, I know you see this as a one-act play, but this is pure memoir text. That's so meaty that I hope you continue to expand and put more of those stories in that don't make it to the stage. I am on a similar journey.
Awesome.
I have written a one-woman play about being my mother's caregiver, who will be 86 in April.
Wow.
And so the question I have for you is, how has this experience, this very intimate experience with dementia affected, I'm not going to guess how old you are. I know you're younger than me. You're probably not going through the change yet.
Not there yet.
Is that an official question?
Are you going through the change?
But with that, how has this affected your own relationship with mortality, with your creativity, your cognition, all of that?
Yes. Am I alive? Did the battery die? I could probably.
Or this one?
Ooh.
Project, baby, project.
I'm the king. No. Yeah. So yeah. Oh yes. Thank you. Just in case people have hearing needs. Yeah. So yes, I'm not sure if it was connected to dementia or how things were taught in my history class, but ever since when I was a very little girl, I had some rough times. I went to a therapist and they said, you got to talk to me. And I said, no, because in my family, you didn't talk to nobody about nothing. And she said, okay, here's this journal. Write whatever you want in it. I'm not going to read it. No one's going to read it. You, whatever you want. And that's when I started writing, and it just like, but every time I would open a new journal, I would start like this history of my entire family, like as if a historian would find it, I'd be like, yes, and here is my family tree, and this is my second cousin removed, and we used to have, yes, Cheerios together. This is very important because Cheerios at the time. No, so like writing a historical. But yes, when she had Alzheimer's, there was that obviously the fear of getting it myself, as well as sometimes it is genetic. It doesn't necessarily have to be, and also the fear of my mother and all those things. And I think I've done a lot more writing and preservation of memory in terms of photos and video, because I think it's important, and I do have that fear of like, if I do go away, I want my life to be somewhere. So I'm like forcing it out there. So I started a Substack like, I don't know, a few months ago when I found out what Substack was, which is basically you can write your own like newsletter basically. But I've been using it. I started a blog in 2020 when the pandemic hit, because I was like, I don't know what is happening. And I started writing poems and spoken word and processing things through that and YouTube. And then but my blog couldn't be subscribed to or anything. So anyway, Substack, I've started doing a lot, and I've noticed a lot of like memories coming up and it feeling like a memoir. So I hope one day, I kind of see it as it preparing me for my book or books, right? Like I'm like, oh, one day I'll go back and I'll pull that and I'll be able to just tell my editor, here you go, read my Substack. But yes, I definitely feel more pushed to write things down and put them in a public way so that there is a part of me, even if I lose those memories. It definitely makes me hold my boyfriend a lot closer. And I'm terrified of losing him, but also losing my memory of him and everyone I love. But I know that everyone I love would be there in any way they could and love me in any way that they could. So, yeah.
By the way, Amy, my mother's name is
Oh. Oh. Thank you.
Well, if you were on Amy's Facebook event, would you share too what?
Oh,
I'm sorry.
no, you're good.
Not
Secrets.
not your secret water. If you're on Amy's Facebook event, maybe you'd share where we can find your work too. 'Cause that's on the next
Maybe Snapped Up in Prayer, the Dementia Diaries.
Love.
January 31st and February 1st in Jumpstart Theater.
Amazing.
Yes, I'll share it.
Yes,
Thank
please
you.
share.
Thank you.
Yes.
We're all, stories like this, right, Amy? We're all interconnected. This spoke to each of us for a number of reasons. And we'll carry it with us as a memory forward. So it's very special to be in the room who we are today and have this as part of our memory. So thank you for sharing this with us. Amy, thank each of you. Thank the Alzheimer's Association, Meals on Wheels, our beautiful ASL interpreters, all of Amy's friends and crew, and of course the owners of Black Ocean. And again, ways to support and learn about Amy's work in the program. Anything else?
No. Thank you for being here. It means a lot. Thank you so much. I really was like, I told my boyfriend, I don't know if anybody wants to go. I don't know if anybody's going to show up, but no, it's okay.
No, that's how we show up for community. So we love you. Thank you for being here.